Session. The Honorable George C. Parrish now presiding.
You may be seated. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. We're here in the matter of Sargent Electric Company versus MJ Electric LLC, 45 CO1 1403 PL21. For the record, would everyone identify themselves and who they're representing?
Charles Kelly, Your Honor, on behalf of Sargent Electric.
Jacqueline working on behalf of Sargent Electric, and we've got general counsel here as well.
Okay. General counsel. Okay.
Good morning, Your Honor. Richard Sargent on behalf of the defendants.
Good morning, Your Honor. Gordon Goliath Jr. on behalf of the defendants. Good morning, Your Honor. Gordon Goliath.
Good morning, Your Honor. Allison Hudson on behalf of the defendants.
Okay. We're ready to proceed. Any preliminary matters that we need to go over?
One preliminary matter, Your Honor, I'm not sure if it's for now or after opening arguments. We have party representatives here in the courtroom, but I believe that Sargent's forensic expert is also in the courtroom. And
You want a separation of witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Whoever's going to testify other than the designee needs to leave the courtroom. All witnesses.
Your Honor, there are multiple MJ representatives. There are only two who are going to testify, Mr. Voss and Mr. Frame today. Are they also going to be excused? I anticipate.
Your Honor, I'll be introducing them in a moment. These are Mr. Frame's a party. Mr. Broccolo is the representative for MJ Electric, who's a party, and Mr. Voss is a party.
Okay.
Mr. Nagy has left.
Are they going to testify?
Yes, they are going to testify, but they're party representatives, Your Honor.
Do you want a separation of all of them?
I'd like Mr. Broccolo.
Okay. You can have one designee.
He's the designee for MJ Electric.
But he's going to testify in this case.
Well, they're entitled to a designee. All right. Anything else?
No other preliminary matters from our end.
Okay. We're ready to... Any arguments or you want to...
Yesterday, Mr. Saldinger's office and our office agreed that we would present 3 opening statements.
Okay.
So you usually have some sense of what the case is about. And then
Sure.
we can proceed.
Okay.
Morning, Your Honor. As I said, I'm Charlie Kelly. I represent Sargent Electric. And this is the date and the hour appointed for the preliminary injunction hearing. Sargent, as you know, has brought this action against MJ Electric, Quanta Services, the parent of MJ Electric, James Voss, and Thomas Frame. Your Honor, this case is about breaches of fiduciary duty, theft of trade secrets, and unfair competition. And in our view, it lays in stark relief the destructive and illegal forces that have been unleashed as a result of 2 former Sargent executives angered at Sargent and their interception with the perfect foil, MJ Electric, a company based in Michigan, which for years has coveted the opportunity to work in the lucrative Northwest Indiana electrical contracting industry, a place where U.S. industrial giants like USS, NIPSCO, ArcelorMittal, and BP operate and dispense lucrative contracts. And the evidence, Your Honor, is going to demonstrate that the defendants, when Mr. Voss and Mr. Frame intercepted with MJ Electric, had the same target and the same purpose. The target, Sargent Electric. The purpose, to steal Sargent's confidential contacts, trade secrets, key core executives that they believed they needed to have to turn a profit. And this was done in a well-timed coup. From start to finish, of meeting to deciding to offer jobs, it took just 10 days. And the purpose, to take Sargent's customer base, to cripple its operations, and without injunctive relief from this board, to actually proceed along the path they are right now and drive Sargent out of this market, replace Sargent. A company, Your Honor, which I might add, has served this community, has been in this community for almost 6 decades, providing jobs and ably performing for the corporate entities in this community. How did this lightning strike occur? The testimony is going to show that there really was a pivotal instigating event. On October 1st, 2013, Sargent Electric named a new president. You're going to hear this name, you're going to hear this testimony from an individual named Mark Guest. When that occurred, Mr. Voss recoiled. He immediately began thinking about leaving Sargent. Why? Because, as you're going to hear, he was passed over. That was his job. In addition, his right-hand man, second in command in the East Chicago office, which is where Sargent has its operations here, Thomas Frank, also recoiled over time. Mr. Guest came in and looked to manage the company and asked for things like budgets, changed certain things like estimating operations, managed in a way that Mr. Frame says he didn't approve of. You're going to hear testimony from Mr. Frame that at times he felt insulted, was not included in management the way he thought he ought. And for Mr. Frame, there became a pivotal event by December 18th. It was a custom in the East Chicago office to buy steaks at Christmas time and dispense them to customers. Mr. Guest asked for a budget for Christmas charity for the customers. When that didn't occur, a budget wasn't submitted, there was an argument between Mr. Frame and Mr. Guest. And on that very day, Mr. Frame contacts another former Sargent employee, says he's unhappy, says he's looking to leave. And that's at the beginning, that moment of the connection to MJ Electric. Within a month, Mr. Frame and Mr. Voss are having dinner in Oak Brook, Illinois, with MJ Electric executives, Mr. Rockwell, Mr. Nagy, Mr. Sutton, and the two of them. Now, Your Honor, you're going to hear testimony that says by November, Mr. Frame and Mr. Voss have both begun discussing leaving Sargent together. And sometime in December or early January, the date is a little bit unclear, Mr. Voss decides that what he wants to do is he wants to prepare a business analysis, and he proceeds to prepare a business analysis that is focused on how to start a company, and it uses confidential Sargent information that relates to how you could actually start a company, start a new electrical company to compete with Sargent, capture Sargent market share in this marketplace. The lines that connect here in this early January period are also significant for MJ Electric. MJ is part of a publicly traded company called Quanta Services, Your Honor. That's based in Houston. Quanta has a meeting in January, the so-called President's Meeting, at which executives from the various other companies that make up this conglomerate meet in Houston to discuss plans. Mr. Broccolo, the Executive Vice President of MJ Electric, in charge of P&L responsibilities for the heavy industrial division, which is what we're talking about, heavy industrial Northwest Indiana work, is advised that Quanta wants to make a major push in that market niche. This is a moment of motivating opportunity. Mr. Broccolo comes back from that meeting, and within no more than a week has a chance to meet Boss and Frank, who want to deliver a company to someone because they're dissatisfied with its operations. So what happens next year? On January 14th, you're going to hear testimony that says, on that day, on Sargent time, in Sargent's office, Mr. Voss and Mr. Frank are meeting to discuss Mr. Voss's business analysis. Mr. Voss, by this time, had asked a senior executive from Sargent to provide numbers, which you're going to see, to Mr. Voss. Those actual numbers, actual revenues, gross margins are used and put into a business plan, which you're going to find is the only business plan that exists for the startup of MJ Electric. There is no MJ Electric business plan. There is no MJ Electric pro forma. There is no MJ Electric long-term forecast. There are no MJ customers. There is no MJ experience. There is no MJ in Northwest Indiana. What happens? 2 days after the dinner, Mr. Frank learns that MJ is interested in continuing talks. By January 23rd, there is a second major meeting in Chicago this time at the Four Seasons Hotel, when, during the day, on Sargent time, when Mr. Voss and Mr. Frank are Sargent employees going down now to meet the president of MJ along with others. And by the next day after that meeting, on January 24th, the evidence is going to show, just 10 days after the first meeting, MJ decided it wants to offer jobs to Frank and Voss. Frank and Voss, their business analysis, Sargent numbers, capture Sargent market share, a list of the positions that they want to fill. 2 managers, Voss and Frank, and the evidence is going to show 5 project manager estimators. What are project manager estimators? They're the engine, Your Honor. They come up with estimates. They come up with the analysis, then reviewed by executives, that determines how to bid, why to bid, and with their experience and expertise in these facilities, are able to pinpoint through their confidential information, through their historic information, from their history of performance, how to proceed with bids, all resting on the confidential trade secret information of Sargent. That business plan, Your Honor, uses the word next to the list of positions that they needed, 4 employees needed to move to start up a company to make it profitable, the word enticement. What was the enticement of business analysis? They needed $97,500, $7,500 apiece for each of the project manager estimators. They could take that group of project manager estimators, by the way, 5 or 6 of them. That's 2/3 of the project manager estimators. Part of the crippling effect on Sargent. And they would want to move them en masse because they wanted to take that expertise. They needed to take that expertise. They needed to have access to that confidential trade secret information to enable them to pursue the likes of BP, ArcelorMittal, USS, and NISCO. What happens next, Your Honor? Well, this is the only business plan. Mr. Voss and Mr. Frank, by January 27th, have draft offer letters in hand, formal offer letters by January 28th, by January 30th, and February 1. They are employees, signed up employees, accepted job offers from MJ Electric, and they're still at Sargent, still revising business plans. And by this time, Your Honor, the activity between MJ Electric and the Sargent employees is going on almost a daily basis. By this time, Your Honor, and continuing at this time, this process, the evidence is going to show, is shrouded in secrecy. Mr. Voss, the testimony is going to show, was not only using Sargent confidential information to plug in to this business plan, to sell to MJ Electric, in effect, to start a company, that wouldn't have to go through the trial and error as part of entering the market. On their own, they can do it. They thought about it. They tried it. You're going to hear evidence that says for 16 years, they submitted bids, never gotten a single award. That's MJ. So, you're going to hear evidence that says the business plan was renamed. It didn't say business analysis in our computer system. It was called GOAT Final Review, the name of a project that had ended. Second, in addition to shrouding this in secrecy, so that it was a document misnamed so no one would understand what it is, the evidence will show that the material is updated. And again, in order to have secrecy, in order to keep this away from Sargent, in order to start and work with a company that is going to become an immediate competitor to Sargent in this marketplace, Mr. Voss knows that he needs to transfer information, as he now starts to do it to MJ, not through Sargent computers, but through the computer of his 17-year-old son, Luke Voss. The evidence is going to show that Mr. Voss did that, enrolled his 17-year-old son, because he knew if Sargent knew what he was doing, he would likely be, quote, shown the door and, quote, terminated, because that was a breach of his duty of loyalty to Sargent. And were they aware that they had duties? Mr. Voss, who had been at Sargent for 5.5 years, Mr. Frame, who had been at Sargent for 25 plus years? Yes. You're going to see, as part of this evidence, an employee manual that has, Your Honor, at section 2.1.6, explicit yet simple language that sets forth this basic fact, not only of employee manuals, but of the law, thank God, in Indiana, which is this, that an employee may not take his employer's confidential trade secret information in order to use it with a competitor or anyone else for his personal gain. For his personal gain. with the information now going out and the process starting to quicken, what happens next? The evidence is going to show on this timeline that while still at Sargent on February 3rd, Mr. Brockwell comes to East Chicago. There's a search that day during the middle of the day. Sargent employees acting as MJ employees now scouting for office space during the middle of the day, 2 p.m. to 4 in northwest Indiana. Followed by a dinner to come up with a 90-day plan. And what was one of the things that was discussed and in those 2 days done while they're Sargent employees? There's a discussion about bringing Mr. Frame's guys, his guys, the project manager estimators, the engines, to MJ Electric. How? Through enticements. Right back to the business analysis, the only one that exists with confidential information at Sargent. What were those enticements? Discussed on February 3rd, $7,500 per the business plan to each of the project manager estimators. Why, Your Honor? Why? Because there had to be an enticement. There needed to be an enticement because these project manager estimators, who happen to belong to a union, were going to have a 2-week layoff. The enticement was to cover their downtime. They analyzed and estimated about how much it would cost to make this an easy transition. No harm, no pain. You can move. Sargent's moving. Move with us. Second, trucks. They wanted trucks. They discussed trucks. Third, guaranteed 40. That means to give them guaranteed 40 hours so they get holiday time paid. Vacation time. Now, February 4th, it's approved. MJ Electric, within 1 day, has corporate approvals for the enticements for 5 people who haven't applied for jobs at that point, who were Sargent employees, who were Frame's guys, and it's already done. And they're still at Sargent. All this is going on at Sargent. While they're still ostensibly Sargent employees. And then how's the timeline stop? At least this part. You're going to hear testimony from Mr. Voss that says he thought after all he did for Sargent, he and Mr. Frame believed that because there were 2 record years in the East Chicago office, that they had done tremendous work for Sargent. And as a result of that, Mr. Voss thought he had earned the right to leave on his own terms. His own terms meant, don't let Sargent know what I'm doing. Leave after I've set up the company in a situation where I can compete with Sargent. Leave after I've laid the groundwork to entice my core employees who I need to make a profit for MJ. Leave after all that's in place without notice and go. On February 10th, Mr. Frame resigns. On February 10th, Mr. Voss resigns. On February 10th, within minutes of leaving Sargent, what's Mr. Frame's first stop? It appears, based on the deposition testimony that you graciously allowed us to have so that we could present this testimony to you. A trailer housing Sargent Electric employees, an Arcelor Mill trailer being used at a BP site where the biggest project for Sargent over the last 2 years has performed. And there's a discussion in that trailer about Mr. Frame, where he's going, and how to get in touch with him, with one of his guys. As he calls, as Mr. Frame calls him, and as Mr. Paul Schumann, who you're going to hear from, calls himself, one of Mr. Frame's guys. And they plug into their phone the relevant information about how to get in touch with Mr. Frame, and within seconds of doing that, they're emailing back and forth to make sure that the line of communication exists unbroken. A natural, fast transition part of the lightning strike. Then what happens, Your Honor? The timeline next moves to within 5 days, on February 17th, Mr. Frame and Mr. Voss go to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. MJ Electric has its home base in a town called Iron Mountain, Michigan. Up they go for orientation. That week, that the testimony is going to show, resumes came in from 19 different possible employees to fill the 5 or 6 project manager estimator positions that were supposed to be part of the new MJ Electric to start up in Northwest Indiana. What happens? Testimony is unclear on this, but from Mr. Voss's recollection, perhaps on the same day, perhaps on February 20th, there are interviews of the Sargent Electric employees, still at Sargent, many of them at work, with MJ executives, where the enticements are rolled out and offer letters go out on the same day, or no more than a day later. No other employees from any other company are considered, only Sargent employees. The Sargent employees that Mr. Frank had plugged in his mind as his guys that he was going to take as part of the business analysis to capture Sargent business. The truth is, if they could compete, what you're going to hear from Mr. Frank. Once that's done, on February 20th, the assault doesn't discontinue. They've gotten the main part they wanted. But here's where some of the trade secret information also really starts to come in a significant way. You're going to hear, Your Honor, about forensic analysis in this case. The art of looking into computers to find out who used those computers and how, and what's been on those computers. And what you're going to hear is that the group of employees, and now at this point, because the raid hasn't stopped, you're going to hear testimony from one of the MJ Electric witnesses. Well, they're all MJ now, but MJ in the beginning, if you will, that they didn't want this to seem like a coup. That would be harmful if it looked like a coup. But the coup continues. And the MJ office, right here in Crown Point, now has 13 employees. How many from Sargent? 12. Why? Because they continue to carry the type of expertise and experience and access to trade secret information that allows for the operation of a profitable company. They call themselves a startup, but startups like this end up in blocks right next to established companies. Again, which is improper under Indiana law. We'll get to that at the end. But so here, the forensic evidence shows, Your Honor, that of the employees who have left, there are devices, and I'm not a computer expert, so bear with me, but each of these employees had laptops assigned to them. Their laptops were password protected at Sargent. Into the Sargent laptops were plugged something called USB devices. Sometimes they're referred to as thumb drives, those little drives you can put into your laptop and either move information onto your laptop or take it off. Sometimes it's a block that looks about like this. It's called an external hard drive that's bigger. You can keep more information. No fewer than 49 of those devices were plugged in. and only three were returned at the time these employees departed from Sargent. The evidence is also going to show that 6 of those devices have been plugged in at MJ Electric computers. The evidence is going to show that that number is actually now 7. We have learned just at the end of discovery that another external hard drive was taken by a Sargent employee, plugged into his MJ computer on the very first day he was at work, and it now sits at his house. At his house. None of this information, none of these devices have been returned. According to the employee who told us, Your Honor, that he has his external hard drive that has his daily work list, the work he did on the BP project, he backed up his backup. That is language that says he backed up his entire computer with confidential trade secret information from Sargent relating to the biggest project Sargent had, and it's on his desk at home, having already been plugged into his computer at MJ. The evidence is also going to show that MJ has not undertaken any investigation. None. All individuals whose depositions have been taken have said, MJ never asked for this. MJ said, hey guys, take the high road. Don't take so much to the pencil. But when it's time to investigate, nothing. With respect to this, Your Honor, the 6 devices that have been plugged in at MJ, 6, 4 of those, 4 are now missing, while this litigation's been underway. No investigation. None. That, Your Honor, is theft. And that is wrong. And we, Your Honor, in addition to this evidence, we're also going to provide evidence that says there have been other oddities along the way that at the end we'll ask you to draw appropriate inferences with respect to. But here's one. In January, at the time that Mr. Frank and Mr. Gloss are doing the only business analysis that exists, which is all about how to capture Sargent market share and deliver it to MJ, are analyzing that. Mr. Frank, knowing he's going to leave, decides it's time to clean his office. You're going to hear evidence that says he filled 9 banker's boxes, 9, with information that relates to projects, estimating information, bidding information, financial information. And rather than saying to someone, you know what, do what we usually do here, let's store those 9 boxes out in the warehouse that's part of Sargent, they take them from Sargent in East Chicago to a building that now houses MJ Electric in Crown Point and store them for somewhere between a week or 2. The evidence is a little fuzzy there, Your Honor. And then the evidence is finally returned, but gone for 2 weeks. Plenty of time to copy every single scrap of paper in those boxes. In addition, you're going to hear evidence that says that the employee, former Sargent, now MJ, Mr. Frank, remembered in February that he had also taken a WD Passport external hard drive that had backed up all kinds of financial and estimating information on it, and had taken it with him. He had it at MJ in Iron Mountain. That's the only device that's been returned. But, Your Honor, that too was our information, off-site, not returned in the normal course when people left. And we're where we are. So, and what are, and I'm going to wrap this up in about 4 paragraphs, Your Honor. This assault isn't just about what's occurred to this day and the remarkable coordination of it and the remarkable speed of it and the remarkable way in which it's allowed a company that coveted this but had no contacts, no information, no expertise that allowed it to enter this market to enter. This is also, Your Honor, a case where 2 other odd things occurred. One is, one of the individuals who's left, one of our project manager estimators, while at Sargent, was working on a project you're going to hear a lot about in the next few days, called Monosol. What's Monosol? Monosol is a company that, among other things, makes detergent packets that go into your dishwasher, and they build something called lines where those packets are manufactured. One of Sargent's employees, while at Sargent, collected information, had worked on prior bids for Monosol, the prior lines runner, lines 11 through 17. While an employee at Sargent, this individual, whose name is Jim Simmons, prepared a bid, told no one at Sargent he was working on the bid, and did not tell anyone at Sargent when he left that he had been working on the bid. And lo and behold, when he goes to MJ, what's he worked on? Monosol line 18. Lo and behold, what happens when he gets to MJ? One of the first pieces of work that MJ's able to obtain is Monosol line 18. Coincidence? The other piece that's significant here, Your Honor, is that on the backs of this core team, on the backs of this expertise and experience, on the backs of this trade information, there were also inroads already into BP, into ArcelorMittal, into NISCO, into USS, the core of Sargent's business. What we're ultimately going to ask you for, Your Honor, at the conclusion of this hearing, after you've heard all the evidence, after you've heard us argue the law, is injunctive relief, which preserves the status quo and doesn't harm MJ, but certainly preserves Sargent's position from further crippling effects and from catastrophic loss of major customers, which is this. MJ should be restrained for the continuation of this case from pursuing relationships at the core Sargent customers. They're not in there. They don't have, in the sense that they have active bids, the testimony, at least through the end of discovery, was there's no active bidding. So this really would put the status quo ante in place. It appropriately protects the position of Sargent Electric, which earned its position in this marketplace over 6 decades. 6 decades. And allows for a proper review of all the facts, a proper investigation, the ability to look at what's on each and every one of these devices that we know still exists, and bring this case to a proper conclusion. But that, Your Honor, is my opening. That's what, from our perspective, is about to unfold over the next few days.
Okay, thank you, Counsel.
Morning again, Your Honor. Sullivan on behalf of the defendants. I would again introduce my co-counsel, Corey Devaya Jr., Corey Devaya Sr., and Ms. Allison Hudson. Also, I want to introduce to the court, you'll be hearing from them directly, witnesses who have been accused of stealing and misappropriation and improper conduct and a whole host of material. Mr. Frank, Tom Frank, Mr. Jim Voss, and then the Executive Vice President from MJ Electric. And we'll also hear from Mr. Tony Brockwell, who's involved in working with these folks, giving them offers, bringing them on to MJ Electric. We'll be hearing from all of them. Now,
Wait, how are they all in here?
they're party representatives. They're
You allowed one.
Mr. Brockwell is representing MJ Electric.
You're allowed one party representative.
And they are. Mr. Frame is representing himself.
Who's your designee?
Mr. Frame is representing himself. We have 3 parties, Your Honor, so we each are allowed a party representative from each party. They're each defendants.
Will they each suit individually? Okay,
Yes,
all right.
Mr. Voss has been sued individually.
Okay, then they're entitled to be.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Your Honor, we're going to talk about just a little bit about Indiana law here, but I just want to start out by a quote from one of the cases that we submitted in our trial brief to the court, which I think the court is a courtesy copy of. We not have reviewed it in advance and to make the court's pleasure, I think have the court review it. But the court is that injunctions will not be issued merely to allay the fears and apprehensions or soothe the anxieties of the parties. Mr. Kelly just told a lengthy story of what he believes happened. Mr. Kelly is not going to be a witness in these proceedings. And just because Mr. Kelly says it, Your Honor, doesn't make it true. Your Honor is going to hear firsthand from all of the witnesses, each and every one, from Mr. Frame, from Mr. Voss, from Mr. Brockwell and Mr. Nagy, 2 of the MJ executives, and from 6 of the former Sargent employees who are now at MJ Electric who decided to make a move and leave Sargent and go to MJ Electric. And Your Honor, make no mistake, when we were before you on the hearing for some discovery issues, I told you a little bit about the case, and you may recall one of the first things I said to the court was, Your Honor, there's no non-compete provision here. There's no non-solicitation provision here. Mr. Kelly will not be able to go to the court and say, Your Honor, look at paragraph 4 of this employment contract, and it says right here, Mr. Voss, for a reasonable period of time of 1 year, is not allowed to compete. He won't be able to show you that employment contract for Mr. Frank, and he won't show you that employment contract for any of the other 6 former Sargent employees who are going to testify here. In fact, Your Honor, I'm going to go one step further. These employees were union employees, part of Local 697 here in town. They are free to move. They are not property of Sargent, any more so that they're now property of MJ Electric. They can be fired, they can quit, there could be a reduction of force. They are free to go and make their own decisions for what's best for them and their family. And what you're going to hear from the witnesses, including, Your Honor, Dan Waldrop, who's the business manager at the Local 697, is that these employees move all the time. And they go where they think the work is going to be. And sometimes they move because things slow down. Sometimes they move because they're concerned about where management is going. Sometimes they may move because they like different projects and want to go with a bigger project and some travel involved. And they move between and amongst different electrical contractors in the area. We're going to show you a list of 15 or 20 electrical contractors in the area, including Sargent and many others. And they move around. And you know what? They work on the same customers at different contractors. Because you do have some major customers in this area, absolutely. You can drive down the road and see them right off of my correct me, off of I-65. You can see the steel mills. The major customers are not a secret. No one knows who they are. And all the contractors are going after that same business, knocking on the door. The customers, Your Honor, they're putting out what's been referred to as RFPs, requests for proposals, requests for bids. They want competition. They want people to come and bring different proposals and choose what they think is best for them. Every project is unique. And as Mr. Frame has taught me, bid your own job. So when each of these contractors puts together the bid, they're bidding their own job based on their own information, their own strategic plans, their own needs, their own estimating systems, the availability of their workforce, and probably 100 different factors. And you'll hear those factors. But my point is, Your Honor, is that MJ has its way of doing things, and Sargent has this way of doing things, and they're separate, and the folks that are now at MJ are doing things the MJ way. This is not a situation where certain individuals left the Sargent branch, went over to the MJ branch, and the executives in Iron Mountain said, go ahead, have at it, let us know how it goes. Not at all. There's been an integration into the MJ system. Folks from Iron Mountain have come down, estimators, and are working and have actually moved to Crown Point and are working firsthand so that when a bid is submitted by MJ, it's an MJ bid. They didn't take any Sargent information, they're not using any Sargent information, and they have no need for Sargent information. MJ Electric has been around for approximately 50 years. They know what they're doing, Your Honor. They know what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long, long time. They don't need Sargent's help, with all due respect. And these individuals left with the thoughts in their head and their experience and certain contacts that they've known for years, long before they even worked for Sargent. Or maybe in some cases some relationships they developed with Sargent. But they're allowed to take what's in their head. There's actually an Indiana case that we quote for the court. I'm just going to, because I thought it was appropriate, talk about if they're not allowed to leave and use what's in their head, that basically they're making everybody give themselves a prefrontal lobotomy. And, it made me snigger, but from a practical standpoint, it's true. You're allowed to leave and use what's in your head. And if you're not, Your Honor, then aren't we effectively restraining them from competing? Because we're saying, you can leave, don't use what's in your head. Good luck to you. In fact, you've developed relationships over time while doing your job, and you can't talk to them either. Don't use what's in your head. But go ahead, compete your heart's desire. How will Mr. Frame or Mr. Voss or any of the 6 other employees compete and decide to move as they're allowed to do? Can't use what's in my head. Can't use my experience, what I've learned about how to estimate, how to put together a job based on the customer's drawings. They wouldn't be able to. So effectively what's happening here is without the written non-compete, they're saying, you can't do it. You can't contact anybody. You can't work for MJ Electric. That's not supported by Indiana law. The story that the actual evidence is going to show, Your Honor, is going to be pretty simple and straightforward. I'm not going to go through it all because I think the court is probably anxious, as am I, to actually hear from the witnesses. Because I can't testify either. As much as I'm sure I'd like to, I can't do it. But Mr. Voss and Mr. Frame decided in the fall of 2013 that they were going to make a move. They had their reasons. They'll explain the reasons, but whether those reasons are good, bad, or otherwise in someone else's opinion, they're allowed to move. And they kept it to themselves, and they did do things the right way. And Mr. Kelly wants to make a point or an argument on how quickly things happened, as if that's some sort of evidence that this was a strategic strike against Sargent. I completely disagree. this did happen quickly, but if this was a pre-orchestrated scheme designed with the intent to cripple Sargent, I think it's going to take a lot more time than less than 30 days to put it together. And you are not going to see, Your Honor, evidence of what we do to take down Sargent. Make sure Sargent doesn't find out. You are not going to see any evidence of either Mr. Frame or Mr. Voss before giving notice, going to these now former Sargent employees and saying, hey, I'm getting ready to move, sit tight, you can follow me, don't say anything, hush hush. They didn't talk to any of them before they gave notice. Those employees were surprised, those employees were surprised when they found out Mr. Voss and Mr. Frame left. Make no mistake, Your Honor, after they left, under the law, if they chose to, if they wanted to, after they left Sargent, they could have solicited those employees. They could have picked up the phone and said, Mr. Simmons, here's where I'm at, I want you to join me. Let's go. Come on, we can do this. They didn't. There was a process. The MJ directive was if anyone is interested in following you, have them post your resume, they'll go through the interview process, and we'll decide what we want to do. And they went through that process. They could have legally solicited. They didn't. They went about this the right way. And each of those employees are allowed, Your Honor, just like you and I and everyone in this courtroom, to make a decision on what they want to do with their career. They're not property of Sargent. And each of them made an independent decision and decided, I think what's best for me is going to MJ Electric. Mr. Frame and Mr. Voss, they didn't deliver them on a platter as if I was delivering to the court a water bottle and saying, here, Your Honor, this is my water bottle, now I'm going to give it to you. Some of those employees chose to follow, and they're allowed to do so. And you will also hear that that's also very common in this industry as people move around. Sometimes employees follow, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing illegal about it. Mr. Kelly talked about some of the forensic evidence, and you will hear from Mr. Wano, who is Sargent's forensic expert. And he will testify that there are certain thumb drives, flash drives, that were plugged in at some point between October 1st of 2013 and sometime in February, over approximately a 4-month period. And they're now unaccounted for. That's what he's going to testify to. He's not going to testify that any Sargent information or property was taken, because he didn't come to that conclusion and because it didn't happen. He's also not going to testify that any former Sargent employees are using any Sargent information, because he did not conclude that and it didn't happen. And Mr. Kelly tells the court, MJ has not conducted any type of investigation. Really? In this lawsuit, in response to the forensic expert, MJ Electric retained the services of Deloitte, who performed an extensive investigation based on refuting what Sargent learned from the Sargent laptops. I mean, how else can we know what the accusations are until we find out, what's the problem? You will hear from Mr. Michael Weil, and you will hear that these devices have not been plugged in to the MJ laptops, and the information hasn't been uploaded, and there's no evidence of use. They're not doing it. They didn't take it, they're not using it, and they had no reason to use it. MJ Electric did not have a large presence in this area prior to opening the Crown Point branch. So stipulated. Does that mean that MJ Electric, a national company with a national presence, can't expand? Can't decide, let's try to open up a market or a branch in the central region. It's good for business. And Your Honor, if you're starting a business, any business, and you need help, are you going to try to hire people with experience, or are you going to try to hire people without experience? What's a good business practice? I respectfully say you look for people who have experience, good people. And if those people are willing to come and join you, good for them and good for you. There's nothing wrong with that. The fact that this happened quickly, that's also good business practice. Once you look to dive and once you paint your shingle and decide I'm going to open up, I'm going to open a business, I'm going to sit back and say, okay, the hard part's over. We'll take a month off and we'll start doing this whenever we get around to it. You want me. That's good business practice. There is nothing improper about what these folks did. And they're allowed to make a living. And they're allowed to move. I want to talk briefly about Indiana law, tie it back to some of the evidence you're going to hear today. Mr. Kelly will talk about the business analysis that Mr. Voss prepared. You're going to hear from Mr. Voss directly about that business analysis and what information was used. And by the way, that business analysis, which will be a subject of Mr. Voss's testimony, he said that was shown to MJ Electric. It was shown to them after offers were given, after offers were accepted. Certainly nothing MJ Electric relied upon in deciding to extend offers to these two gentlemen. And then you will hear from Mr. Broccolo, who will tell you, yes, there was a business plan. There was a pro forma that was put together after these gentlemen joined. And it was not based on any Sargent information. It was not based on any business analysis. It's MJ Electric crunching the numbers, knowing the costs, and figuring out how do we break even in the first year. And the revenue number is actually backed into. There was no reliance on Sargent information. MJ Electric can do just fine on its own. Thank you very much. Mr. Kelly talks about the incentives. The incentives that they were, the enticements, I think he called them. Indiana law allows a competitor to solicit another competitor's at-will employees. Indiana law allows you to offer incentives to attract employees from a competitor. There's nothing wrong with that. There's also nothing wrong under Indiana law with making plans to leave before you give notice. I'll speak for myself, can't speak for anyone else in this room. I've changed jobs over the years. All of us make some plans to leave before we have to go out the door. That's normal. Totally normal. But while they were planning, did they pass up any opportunities and not do the best they could for Sargent to the day they left? There'll be no evidence that they did anything before work to the very day that they left. And once they left, Your Honor, there will be no evidence that they interfered with any of Sargent's current contracts. There will be no evidence that they went after any bids that were outstanding when they left. What I mean by that is if Sargent had made a bid and it was outstanding waiting for an award, there will be no evidence that MJ Electric said, we'll tell that customer to hold off on an award. We want to submit a competing bid. We know where Sargent's at, so we know we can beat them, so just tell them to hold off. Didn't happen. They're looking at new work. They're a startup branch with guys with experience, make no mistake, and they're looking at new work like anybody else and like the other contractors, the 15 or 20 other signatory contractors to the collective bargaining agreement. They're looking for new work. They're trying to get their foot in the door. There's nothing wrong with that under Indiana law or otherwise. There will be no evidence that they took any of Sargent's purported trade secrets. There's no evidence, there will be no evidence that they are using Sargent's trade secrets. Whatever those trade secrets might be, and that's a debate that we might have for the court ultimately to decide what is or is not a trade secret. That's a matter of law. I can assure you that we're not using it, we didn't take it, and we're not misappropriating it. The court, I'm sure, is well familiar with the standards for injunctive relief. And the balance of harms here, Your Honor, what they're suggesting is, without a written non-compete, stop these guys. The first time, by the way, I heard Mr. Kelly sort of restrain anything of what they're asking for. So if you look at their motion, they basically suggest that these individuals should not be allowed to work for MJ Electric. and not be allowed to solicit or go after the business of any of the customers they worked on while at Sargent. And they can't hire anybody from Sargent either. That's part of their written prayer for relief. But in any event, they're allowed to go out and compete for the big guys, the small customers, the middle customers, any way they want to do business by using their own information and their own way of doing business. And they shouldn't be restrained from that in the least. There's no likelihood of success on the merits that Sargent will demonstrate by preponderance of the evidence. And the balance of harms trying to put these guys out of business. Your Honor, Sargent is not a mom and pop shop. As Mr. Kelly said, they've been around for 60-some years. They've got estimators all over the country. They continue to bid work here today. They haven't been crippled by this. I can understand. I certainly can understand. And I'm not going to say otherwise why they're unhappy that these people left and certain other employees followed them. I get that. But that doesn't mean anything improper happened. That doesn't mean anything illegal happened or there's any misappropriation. And because they're unhappy, and because they think, well, they have access to information, so they must be using it. You will see this case, Your Honor, their evidence is all based on innuendo, conjecture, what they could have done. 9 boxes, use that example, 9 boxes were moved from Sargent on-site to an off-site Sargent warehouse. Actually being leased by Sargent for a couple weeks. They were wrapped up. Mr. Frame wrapped up some boxes that were in his office for old work, wrapped them up, taken out there for a couple weeks, and then they were brought back. In the same condition that they left, still wrapped up. Aha! During those 2 weeks, Mr. Frame went out there, copied all that information, and now he's using it against us. One does not lead to the other. It's a series of connections and trying to connect dots that don't connect. That's going to be their evidence. USB drives are missing. They're unaccounted for. These things were passed around like candy at Sargent. They weren't Sargent issued. Here, Mr. Frame, you have flash drives 101 and 105. Please return them when finished. They're passed around like candy. They're about this big. They're unaccounted for. Some are missing. Aha! They're stolen. They've been taken by the employees and they're using it against us. That's what they're going to come to the court with. It doesn't come close, Your Honor, respectfully, to a preponderance of the evidence or likelihood of success on the merits. So some final thoughts, Your Honor. You're going to actually see that, one of our themes that I've been talking about with my clients is about taking the high road. It's not my theme, it's their theme. You're going to see emails that say, continue to take the high road. If this was a calculated, pre-orchestrated scheme to take down Sargent, this court would be presented with a lot of evidence that just simply does not exist. So we're going to take the high road in this proceeding as well, Your Honor. And as much as we're being accused of being thieves, liars, stealing information, unfairly competing, and make no mistake, they're accusing my clients of criminal conduct. I'm not overstating that. It's not hyperbole. It's right there. And it's right there in memos that Mr. Guest wrote. We're going to simply present the evidence, and I ask the court to listen to the actual witnesses, hear their stories. Not Mr. Kelly's story, not even my story. Let them tell the story, and then let the court decide if they think anything improper is happening. I thank you in advance for your time.
All right. You ready to call your first witness, Mr.?
Yes. I would like to call, Sergeant would like to call James Boss.
Okay. Hey, Michael. Hold my jacket pocket. I got Boss. I think stand, sir. Yes.
If I may, the parties have cooperated in trying to make this a process that functions well for you. So these binders, which you've probably been noticing, contain all the possible exhibits. We surely don't anticipate where each one of these is going to be admitted. But what I'd like to do, if you will allow it, is if I may approach the bench and the witness, I will give put a set of binders near you and the witness, and as this moves forward.
Well, the exhibit stipulated to, or is there going to be an objection?
We've almost, Your Honor, we've got, well, I think yes, but for about 5 of them. So at the end of the day, on authentication and disability issues of the roughly 160 exhibits we see there, we're down to 155 are fine, and maybe 5 are left over if we end up with an argument.
Okay.
But I don't think we need to do that now.
All right, you can.
I agree. They're all in binders and they're all well numbered, so I don't think it's as cumbersome as it may appear. We can direct the witness in the court to the exhibit number and go from there.
Okay.
Your Honor, may I approach the bench?
Yes. They finished this? Yeah. They did?
After I left, yes.
They didn't train you?
Not really, but I do have a sidebar on right now. You hear the white noise in the speaker?
Yeah. Where are you controlling it from?
I have a tablet just like you remember.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how the court wants to organize these. It's obviously numerical, and I think you have...
Systems a day late. We just put this in. You could have all this on disk.
I'm going to miss the trial, Your Honor, for a couple of weeks. Nah, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Sorry, the trees suffered.
I'm just saying, they just installed this system where all this could have been put on a disk. You can show it there on your monitors.
Yeah. Well, what we may do, Your Honors, we were talking with Paul earlier, and I think maybe at closing, we're going to try to use some of your new technology so that we can...
PowerPoint. All right.
Yeah. At any rate, so this is old-fashioned. I apologize for that.
Oh, well, I don't even know how to use it yet. Great. We just finished it yesterday.
We're all in the same boat.
So, what I'll do is, excuse me, sure. What I'll do is, rather than putting it in front of the witness right now,
Okay.
When I know what I'm going to use,
Yeah, you can just point it out to him. Sure. Okay, sir, you want to stand and be sworn? Do you solemnly swear affirm tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Please be seated.
Raise one other housekeeping.
Sure.
With respect to Mr. Guest, one of the witnesses who is outside right now, as of the filing of the answer in this case, is now actually a defendant. He's been sued for defamation, so he, like Mr. Frank and Mr. Voss, is an individual party.
He's a party. If he's a party.
That's been extended to Mr. Frank and Mr. Voss.
Your Honor, he actually, I'm not sure if he's appeared yet in this case, because his answer is not yet due, and certainly the defamation claim is not anything that's going to be decided in this preliminary injunction hearing.
But Your Honor, if he's a party, belonging parties.
He's a party. Yeah.
I don't understand.
Okay. Okay.
Is the custom to typically start from behind the podium, or do you have...
Behind the podium, you can be picked up for the record. But if you need to approach the witness, feel free to.
What I'll do is, when those occasions arise, Your Honor, I'll respect the request that I have that.
Sure.
And then proceed.
Yes.
Your Honor,
Okay.
right.
Yes, you may.
Mr. Voss, you ready?
Yes, I am.
Good morning, Mr. Voss. As you know, I'm Charlie Kelly. I represent Sargent Electric. Could you please state your name for the record?
James Joseph Voss.
And how old are you?
I'm 53.
Are you currently employed?
I am currently employed.
And are you employed by MJ Electric?
Yes, I am.
And can you describe briefly what your duties are at MJ Electric?
I'm Director of Operations, and I am heading the new office in Cropland, Indiana.
And you're performing essentially the same duties at MJ that you performed at Sargent, correct?
Not exactly.
At MJ Electric, you're involved in budgeting, overseeing staff, estimating, reviewing financials, and running the office in Crown Point, correct?
That is true, but I'm much more involved in the estimating process at MJ. We are engaged in the integration process with Charlie existing systems and Iron Mountain. And that is, my days are significantly different now than they were.
Just so this is clear, you are saying you're involved in budgeting, overseeing staff, estimating, reviewing financials, and running the office in Crown Point, correct?
Yes.
And you did essentially the same thing at Sargent, correct?
Yes.
Now, and you testified today in your deposition, correct?
Sorry?
And you testified today in your deposition, correct?
I believe so.
Well, if at any point we need to, we can check your deposition. And when you worked at Sargent, you were in East Chicago, right?
I spent most of my time in East Chicago, but I was also on T.R.O.
And you worked for Sargent for roughly 5.5 years, correct?
That is correct.
And during that time, you felt you built that office, correct?
I felt that was a big part of the growth of that office, yes.
And in fact, you believe that in 2012 and 2013, you delivered record years for Sargent, correct?
2012 and 2013 were, in fact, record years at Sargent.
And you've come off major projects with BP Whiting Refinery, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you felt you delivered significant value to Sargent, correct?
Yes, I did.
In fact, you felt you delivered such significant value that you deserve big bonuses, right?
That was what was promised to me when I joined the Sargent group.
In 1 year, 2013, you wanted $120,000 and you didn't get it, did you?
No, I did not.
But you wanted that amount, right? 120.
Yes, I did.
And in 2012, you asked for 150 as a bonus, right?
That is correct.
You asked Steve Dake, the CEO of Sargent, for that, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you didn't get it, right?
I did not get 150, that is correct.
You got 30 instead, right?
I never asked Steve Dake. I never set a number for him in 2013.
And there came, well, you didn't get those numbers, 120 and 150, correct?
I requested 150 from Steve Dake in 2012 and received 120. I never had a discussion or negotiation with Steve for 2013.
Right. And what you wanted, you told me, your deposition was 120, correct?
Yes.
And you got 30, right?
That is correct.
And with respect to the late summer of 2013, do you recall meeting an individual named Mark Guest?
Yes, I do.
And who's Mark Guest?
Mark Guest is the president of the Sargent Electric Company.
And he's in this courtroom.
Yes, he is.
You know Mr. Guest, correct?
Yes, I do.
You worked for Mr. Guest, correct?
I did.
And when you first met him in the summer of 2013, was that around August?
Yes, it was.
In East Chicago?
Yes.
And meeting him made you immediately apprehensive, correct?
Meeting him made me apprehensive. The manner in which my boss presented him to me made me apprehensive.
So you were apprehensive after you met Mr. Guest, correct?
I was apprehensive after my boss presented it to me.
And that was Mr. Dake, correct?
Yes.
And when you first met Mr. Guest, it was in East Chicago with Mr. Dake and Mr. Guest, correct?
Mr. Dake, Mr. Guest, and Mr. Frank.
Okay. And for the court's benefit, we've been referring to Mr. Dake. I'll slow down. Stephen Dake, in 2013, was the CEO of Sargent Electric, correct?
No, he was the president. He was the president. You know what? He was president and CEO, yes. That's correct.
And you worked for him, correct?
That's correct.
And you, Mr. Dake, Mr. Guest, and Mr. Frank had lunch together and chit-chatted, right?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Frank, we should start identifying people now that we're here. Who's Mr. Frank?
Mr. Frame was the vice president and general manager of East Chicago operations.
And did Mr. Frame work for you?
Yes, he did.
And what did Mr. Frame do in the East Chicago office?
Tom also with investments with me. We both prospected in business, interfaced with the LakeCo, with the manager.
Were you the two top managers in the East Chicago office?
Yes, we were.
And do you recall having a conversation after the lunch with Mr. Dave and Mr. Guest and Mr. Frame, just you and Mr. Dave?
I did have a discussion with Mr. Dave.
And you told him, right, that if you were passed over as president for Sargent in favor of Mark Guest, that was not going to go over too well with you?
I did say that, yes.
In fact, you said, Steve, I'm going to have a very difficult time accepting being passed over for Mark Guest, right?
Yes.
You said that, right?
I did say that, yes.
And you meant that, right?
I did mean it, yes.
And in light of the fact you just delivered 2 record years for Sargent, you thought you should be president, right?
I thought I should be president because that was what was promised to me when I was hired. When I was hired, after almost 30 years with Higher Electric in this area, Sargent Electric reached out to me, and the hook was, Jim, if you perform, the top spot is yours. We're looking for someone to ascend to the top spot. That was the promise that was made to me. So, based on that promise, I did hold that expectation, yes.
And you were angry when you were passed over, correct?
I was hurt. I was very hurt. I never expressed anger.
Okay. Did you immediately start to do due diligence on who Mark Guest was after you met him that very first time?
It's a very small industry, and I made a couple calls and asked a couple people if they had heard of Mark to get some background on him. Yes, I did.
Who did you contact?
Well, one of the things that Mark Guest shared with me that he had worked at MJ Electric. There were a couple of individuals that were working for me that had a history. I reached out to them.
And who were they?
Jack Chapman and Mary Chapman.
And where were they working?
They were working for Sargent Electric in southern Indiana and southern Ohio out of the T.R.O office.
After you contacted them, did you talk to them again?
I spoke with them as a regular matter, as a course of our jobs.
And you came away with information from them, right? It said that Mr. Guest was a snake in the grass, sneaky, and not forthright, right?
Those were things that were shared with me, yes.
And that was a concern to you, right?
Yes, that did concern me.
And the truth is that was your own view, right?
I didn't have a view of Mark at that point. I had met him one time.
Well, in fact, Mr. Boss, you thought the whole sequence of the day that you spent that afternoon with Mr. Day and Mr. Guest was odd, right?
Well, in the morning, we settled a major project, and I thought it was interesting that Mr. Day asked me to meet someone and interview them without explaining to me the purpose of the interview.
And you thought that was odd, right?
Yes.
And when at some point you were actually having a conversation with Mr. Guest in your office, right?
Yes.
Just the two of you?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of that, as you understood?
I was to interview Mark.
And at a certain point, Mr. Dake came and told Mark that he was going to have to run with Mr. Dake back to the airport to return to Pittsburgh, correct?
Yes, that did happen.
And at that point, Mr. Guest said to you, or actually said to Mr. Dake, that he'd like to have the chance to get more information from you, right?
He said that as he was exiting my office.
And that struck you as strange, right?
Yes, it did.
You wondered who's interviewing whom, right?
Yes, I did.
You thought that was odd, right?
I did think that was odd.
And it made you wonder and distrust Mr. Guest right then and there, right?
False.
It was disturbing to you that people you knew and trusted in the industry thought Mark Guest was a snake in the grass, right?
Naturally.
You told me that in your deposition.
I did say that.
So you didn't think it was odd, you were disturbed, correct?
I was bothered by the reports that I got from Mark Guest, yes.
In about October 2013, Mr. Guest did become president, correct?
Yes, he did.
Before he assumed that position, he came out to East Chicago to talk with you, right?
He did.
And you told him that you were disappointed with that decision, but you'd be a good soldier, right?
That is true.
Those are the words you said, that you'd be a good soldier.
I don't know if those were the words I used or not, but I told him that I would do my job and help him. Yes, I did.
You try to be a good soldier, right?
I don't remember saying using that term.
But that's, in effect, what you were telling him, right?
I told him that I would do my job. Yes, I did.
And be a good soldier.
I don't remember using the term soldier.
But notwithstanding the promise that you were going to do your job, be a good soldier, as soon as the announcement had been made about Mr. Guest, you immediately began considering leaving Sargent, right?
I did consider it, however, I didn't want to make any rash decision. I waited a long period of time. I didn't want to make an emotional move. I was entrenched there, and so, yes, the thought occurred to me, but I didn't make any kind of plans at all. I wanted to calm down and think about it.
Calm down.
Yes, I was hurt.
And by December, you asked John Gordish, the Sargent employee who worked for you, to provide you with various financial data for Sargent, correct?
That is true.
Who's John Gordish?
John Gordish was our accounts receivable manager in the Chicago office.
And he did work for you, right?
Yes.
And do you recall when in December you asked for this data?
Not specifically, but it was late on.
And we're talking about December 2013 now, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Let me show you an exhibit, and I think that the exhibit is actually number 21 in the book. I'll bring a book to you, Mr. Foster. John,
Yes, you may.
There's 1 through 50, so it's 21.
Mr. Bloss, I have just put before you what we have pulled together. And by we, I mean your counsel and counsel for Sargent Electric, working jointly, have made an effort to put within these binders various exhibits, almost all of which we looked at during various depositions. And what I have placed in front of you, and for the record, I did speak just now briefly 2 sentences to Mr. Bloss telling him what that was and how to use it, but for the record, I showed Mr. Bloss that there are tabs on the side that will reflect where I'm headed with any particular exhibit. So, Mr. Bloss, do you have a binder that says exhibits 1 through 50 on the front?
Yes, I do.
And if you turn to exhibit 21, Driver, do you have exhibit 21?
Yes, I do.
Counsel has 21? I do. Mr. Bloss, if you look now just for a second at Exhibit 21. What you should have in your binder is an exhibit that is made up of 5 pages. And the top page would reflect email correspondence. The second page would be Sargent Electric 2013 year-end billings. And then beneath that, there's another email, actually 2 emails. And then the 5th document would be a Sargent Electric 2013 year-end billings document. You see that?
Yes, I do.
And do you have those 5 pages before you?
I do.
Now, we had stopped here for a second at Exhibit 21 as a result of my question to you about check orders. Now, can you recall that question, Mr. Boss?
I'm sorry, no, I don't recall the question.
Okay, then let me, I'll start the sequence since we have gone through a little housekeeping here. Do you know who John Gordish is?
I do know John.
And I think you told me, correct, that he worked for you?
Yes, John did.
And I think you told me just now that he had a job in the financial areas relating to accounts receivables, correct?
Yes, that is
And I
correct.
think you just told me that in late December, you first asked him for information relating to Sargent financial data, correct?
Yes, that is true.
And then he responded, correct?
That is correct.
What we're looking at here in Exhibit 21 is an email, 2 emails actually. There's one that is dated on the first page of this exhibit from Mr. Gordish to you, dated December 31st. The subject is year-end gross margin numbers for 2013. Do you see that?
I do.
And Mr. Gordish says to you, attached to the gross margin numbers, please look at the highlighted notes. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And you had asked Mr. Gordish for the Sargent year-end and gross margin numbers for 2013, correct?
I did.
And he provided those to you, correct?
That is correct.
And the second page of this exhibit would reflect Sargent Electric 2013 year-end billings as of 12/31/13, correct?
Yes.
And that reflects revenue, cost, margin, and gross margin data, correct?
It does.
And that's confidential information, correct?
I'm just going to object to the form of the question. That's now for a legal conclusion. I think it's up to the court to decide what Sargent's confidential information is or a trade secret. The way he phrased the question, he said, and that is Sargent's confidential information.
Well, Your Honor, the question here is certainly one of mixed fact and law, but the fact of the matter is that, and as we're going to show, Mr. Voss, a longtime employee of Sargent, had an employee handbook, which at 2.1.16 refers to confidential information. It says you as an employee should not be passing around financial information because it's confidential. So I think that I'm not trying to have him stand in your shoes to become a decider of law, but certainly a former executive at our office would understand whether or not he considered this in the normal course confidential information that he would not share outside the
Maybe the
Sargent.
form of the question, if you lay a little more foundation for what his knowledge is of the procedures in
It
this.
wasn't a form of question.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Voss, if you look with me for a second at what we have identified in your exhibit binder as Exhibit 3. Now, Mr. Voss, have you seen Exhibit 3 before?
I have,
And that's an employee manual, correct?
yes.
And you had an employee manual while and a sergeant, correct?
Yes, I do.
And if you look with me, as you glance through this employee manual, does this look like the standard employee manual that existed while you were a sergeant?
Yes, it does.
And if you look at section 2.1.6 of that employee manual, there's a section called confidential and proprietary information. Do you see that?
I do.
In there, for the benefit of the record, it says, you must not disclose the company's confidential or proprietary information to anyone outside the company or use such information for your own personal benefit. Confidential or proprietary information includes information on the company's decisions, planning, business strategy, competitive bids, existing or potential customers, suppliers, financial results for operations, trade secrets, patents, research, studies, construction, and fabrication techniques, etc. See that?
Yes, I do.
And if we return then to Exhibit 21, where this started, I think you testified, Mr. Voss, correct, that the second page of this exhibit that relates to Sargent's 2013 year-end billings as of 12/31/13 are in fact Sargent's numbers, correct?
Yes, these are Sargent's numbers.
And as the head of the East Chicago office, you would have understood that these financial results would be considered confidential at Sargent, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And not to be used for your own personal benefit, correct?
Yes.
And that says that in the employee manual, correct?
Yes, it does.
And if we look at the next page, and by that I mean there is an email that intercepts here. It looks like it may be the same email. Sorry. No, different days, I'm sorry. But I don't want to focus on that email. If we skip to the last page of this exhibit, does it appear to you, Mr. Voss, that the second page of this exhibit and the fifth page of this exhibit are in fact the same document? Second page of the exhibit and the last page.
It doesn't look like it's the same.
Okay, so this is the same document containing Sargent confidential information, correct?
Judge, the form of the question.
All right. He's established. What is understanding of confidential?
That's fine.
Okay.
Correct.
I'm sorry, what was the question, please?
In the fifth page contains Sargent confidential information, correct?
Yes.
Now, at or about the time that you had received this financial data from Mr. Ford, had you also started to work on something that was called a business analysis?
I did.
And at some point in October, you actually downloaded from the computer a form, if you will, of how to go about preparing a business analysis, correct?
I did do that. I'm not sure if that was downloaded or it was online and I printed it off.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I will try to make sure I use my computer terminology correctly. So you looked at a business analysis and then printed it out from the computer? And let me show you that document. I've got a cross-reference here for a second. Right. I believe it's in the same binder. If you turn to Exhibit 39, in the binder that I believe the court has before it right now, and Mr. Voss, I believe in your binder.
Yes, I have this.
Mr. Voss, we just asked you to turn to Exhibit 39, and you had a chance to take a quick look at Exhibit 39.
I have.
I'm correct that this is the business plan that you printed out, correct?
Yes, it is.
And you used this as a model of sorts to start your own business plan, correct?
I read through it to refresh my memory on how to put together a business plan. I don't think I used anything out of here.
You just used it to refresh your memory on how to prepare it, correct? Just
Yes.
and now, with respect to the business plan, I'm not talking about Exhibit 39 now. I'm talking about a business analysis that you created. Did you, in fact, create a business analysis?
Yes, I did.
And when was the first time you can recall starting to work on that business analysis?
I don't know exactly, but I do believe it was towards the end of December.
And you worked on it for roughly 2 weeks until you had a version of it prepared by January 14th, correct?
I don't know the duration that I worked on it. I don't think it took me 2 weeks. It was cobbled together probably more likely a couple of hours.
Okay, so you cobbled together a business analysis within 2 hours?
I don't recall the exact time, no.
Well, you recall doing it in late December and it didn't take a long time, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that was
How long did it take?
I don't recall. I worked on it intermittently. I just don't know the amount of time I spent on it.
And if you look with me, Your Honor, we're staying in the same binder.
Okay.
We are moving to Exhibit 1 in that binder. And Mr. Voss, if you would turn to the beginning of that binder, Exhibit 1. Mr. Voss, do you have Exhibit 1?
I do.
And do you recognize Exhibit 1?
I do.
Exhibit 1 says 1/14/2014, Revision 2/5/14, Business Analysis, NWI Electrical Construction Team. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And have you had a chance to glance through these pages?
I have looked at this, yes.
And is this the business analysis that you drafted?
Yes, this is an iteration of that, yes. I don't know if it's the original or not.
Now, and at the time that you were drafting this, you've then continued to be teased from time to time through the fall by some of your friends about being asked over for president, correct?
There was one individual who was a business associate who gave it to me once or twice. So I was not teased by my friends over this period, you know.
Okay, and who was that business friend? Mr. Voss, can I remind you of the rule that you and I tried to share to our best ability when making the deposition? Please let me finish my question. I'm going to try to allow you to finish your answer. That way, we ensure that the court hears every word that you utter and I utter.
Yes, I will.
Now, Mr. Voss, the person who, that one person who kidded you or whatever you were describing, who was that?
It was Steve Gorman.
And who is Steve Gorman?
He was my counterpart in the joint venture, Sargent Electric and Saks Electric were partnered up to perform some major work at BP White. He was my counterpart there.
Mr. Voss, so is the document that we're looking at, Exhibit 1, the business analysis that you first drafted?
This is certainly an iteration of that. I don't know if it's the original draft or not.
And if you look with me for a second at Exhibit 2. Exhibit 2, the cover of Exhibit 2 is an email from, at the top it says from Luke Voss to Jim Voss. Do you see that?
I do.
And Luke Voss is your 17-year-old son, correct?
That is correct.
And then the email continues from Luke Voss, date Wednesday, February 5th, 2014 at 5:28 p.m. You see that?
I do see that.
And that's your son Luke's email address, vossluke4@gmail.com, correct?
Yes, it is.
And this email is purporting to send information to bnagey@mjelectric.com. Do you see that?
Yes,
Bill Nagy is the vice president at MJ Electric, correct?
that is true.
And he was the vice president on February 5th, 2014, correct?
Yes, that is
And
correct.
Tony Broccolo is an executive vice president at MJ Electric, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And he was an executive vice president of MJ Electric on February 5th, 2014, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And keyframe at Sargent.com, on February 5th, that was accurate, right? Tom Frame, at the time Luke was trying to dispense this business analysis, was still an employee of Sargent Electric, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
As were you, correct?
Yes, I was.
Now, if you look at the Exhibit 2, if you go to the third page, and Your Honor, here, off and on during the course of the discovery period, we attempted, Your Honor, to put base stamp numbers in the lower right-hand corner. Sometimes they show up, and sometimes they were obscured through copying. But when I'm able, Your Honor, and for the clarity of the record, I intend to refer to the exhibit and then to a bait number to ensure we all know where we are.
Okay.
So in that respect, and since this is the first time I'm going to have the chance to use bait lettering, I would ask the court and Mr. Voss to go through Exhibit 2 to MJ 781.
Okay.
Mr. Voss, have you arrived at MJ 781?
I am.
And this is a drawing, right?
It is a drawing.
And this is a layout for a new office in either Crown Point or some location in Northwest Indiana, correct?
Yes, it is.
And an office that would be housing employees for MJ Electric, correct?
That is correct.
Including you, correct?
Yes.
Because at that time, on February 5th, you'd already accepted an offer from MJ Electric, correct?
That is true.
And you were making this drawing when you were an employee at Sargent Electric, correct?
That is correct.
And you made this drawing, was it on or about February 5th, or was it earlier than that?
I don't know the date I made this drawing.
Well, 2 days
On or around the 5th, it has to be. That's my email. I don't know what the date is.
and just 2 days before, you had actually been with Mr. Broccolo. And is Mr. Broccolo your boss?
Yes, he is.
So you were with Mr. Broccolo, now your boss, and I don't know what he was on February 3rd, but on February 3rd, you took a trip around Northwest Indiana to look at sites with Mr. Broccolo, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you took Mr. Frame and Mr. Broccolo, who met you in East Chicago, around 2 p.m. on February 3rd, right?
Yes.
And you were a Sargent employee, correct?
I was a
So was Mr. Frame, right?
Yes, Mr. Frame was an employee.
And you decided about 2 o'clock to leave Sargent and to work for Sargent and meet Mr. Brockwell, the Executive Vice President of MJ Electric, and go scouting for locations for a office for MJ Electric, correct?
Yes, we did.
And you spent 2 hours doing that, correct?
I couldn't say the exact time.
From roughly 2 to 4, right?
Could be.
Isn't that what you told me in your deposition?
Could be, yes.
Is that your best recollection today? You spent about 2 hours looking at sites?
Yeah, I would say that's probably close, yes.
Or was it more, Mr. Luss? Was it 3 or 4 hours?
No, I don't think so.
So 2's about right.
Could be, yes.
If you look with me for a second, in this business analysis, attached as the last 2 pages to this business analysis that you were asking Luke, your son, to email to an executive vice president and a vice president of MJ Electric while you were still employed at Sargent. If you look at MJ 788, you see that?
I do.
There you see a Northwest Indiana revenue/year BP and non-BP chart, right?
Yes.
This reflects actual numbers from Sargent Electric, correct?
They're actual through 2012 and projected for 2013.
So these are Sargent Electric financial results, correct?
Yes, they are.
Displayed in graph form, correct?
That is correct.
And as we looked at earlier today, and to avoid further time on this, you understood under the employee manual that this was financial results of operations and therefore confidential information at Sargent Electric, correct?
Yes, that is a fair statement.
And if you look at MJ 789, there you see Sargent Electric 2013 year-end billings as of 12/31/13. You see that?
I do.
And those are Sargent actual numbers, correct?
Yes, they are.
And that's Sargent financial information, correct?
It is.
And as a result, confidential information, correct?
I agree.
And if you look with me for a second back at your business analysis, and for the ease of not jumping around too many documents, let's stay with Exhibit 3, the one that Luke tried to send to Mr. Rocco and Mr. Navy.
Exhibit 2.
Yes, Exhibit 2. Are you still there?
I am.
The only shifting I'm going to ask you to do on this one, Mr. Boss, for a second is if you would look at page MJ 783. If you look at that page, and Your Honor, do you have that?
Yes.
If you look at the top, the upper left-hand corner, 1/14/2014 revised 2/5/14. You see that?
I do.
And 2/5/14 revised, that just happens to be the same date as Luke's email date, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And if we look for a second at the historic recurring revenue, that reference to historic recurring revenue is a reference to Sargent's historic recurring revenue, correct?
It is.
And the list of customers there includes BP Whiting, correct?
That is correct.
And USS, correct?
Yes.
And ArcelorMittal, correct?
Yes, ArcelorMittal is listed here.
And NITSCO, correct?
Correct.
And you had commercial customers then too, right?
Yes, I did.
Would Safety Clean be included in that group?
No.
Was Safety Clean a customer of yours then?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
In 2013?
Sargent was working for Safety Clean in 2013, yes.
And Citgo?
Yes.
And with respect to this list, then, what you're referring to is Sargent recurring revenue for Sargent customers, correct? As listed.
I'm sorry, can you ask that again, please?
Sure. When it says historic recurring revenue, that's Sargent recurring revenue for the customers of Sargent listed on that chart, right?
Well, it's not the correct terminology because it isn't recurring. It's just 1 year. But those are customers that are available for Sargent to work at on a year-to-year basis. These numbers do not reflect what it would be annually. It fluctuates.
And Mr. Voss, if you look with me now, we'll look back and forth here a little bit. If you go to MJ 789, and if you take a look at that page says Sargent Electric 2013 year-end billings as of 12/31/13. You see that?
I do.
And if you look in the revenue column, it says $3,244,029 for BP. You see that?
Yes.
And then if you look at page 783 for BP Whiting WP,
Yes.
are you there?
Yes, I am.
There, in that column, it says 2013 actuals. It says $3,244,000, correct?
Yes, it does.
So you took that number from the Sargent Electric 2013 year-end billings, correct?
Yes, I did.
And I don't want to belabor this, but what we see here for USS, ArcelorMittal, NIPSCO, and commercial under 2013 actuals, those are all numbers that you lifted or took from the MJ 789, correct?
That's correct.
And at this time, there was no recurring revenue that MJ Electric had in this market, correct?
That is correct.
So you weren't using MJ Electric numbers.
No, that is correct.
They didn't have any projects in this market at that point, correct?
That is correct.
Now, and am I correct, Mr. Voss, and I think we discussed this at your deposition, but one of the things you were doing here in looking at recurring revenue of Sargent was looking to see what business might be available to you if you left Sargent, right?
Yes. Yes, what possible market share is available to be captured as another competitor? Yes, that is correct.
Right, and you told me that in your deposition, that you were making that analysis of what you can take from Sargent if you competed with Sargent, correct?
I knew as a new competitor I would be cutting into Sargent's market share as I would be cutting into others' market share.
And you were looking at, well, let's strike that. It's also true, correct, that you discussed with MJ what part of Sargent's past recurring revenue MJ might capture if you brought it to MJ, right?
No, I never had that discussion.
Is that true? You didn't discuss that with me in your deposition. Is that your testimony?
I don't recall that discussion in the deposition.
Well, let's take a look at your deposition testimony and see if we can straighten this out. May I approach the bench and the witness?
Yes.
Looking at page 73.
Your Honor, if I may, formal over substance, I'm sure Mr. Kelly trying to impeach something that typically not necessary to show the deposition. If he has something to read, he can. I don't think it's necessary to show it to the witness. I'm not sure how the court wants to handle these situations. That's my experience. I defer to the court.
Well,
Your Honor, I guess as I am lucky enough, I've got a license in Illinois and a license in Pennsylvania, and I was lucky enough to be appearing here at Pro-Hoc, and I certainly want to conform with the customs of the Indiana courthouse and this courtroom in particular.
we're publishing these depositions?
I don't believe so, Your Honor. Because other witnesses are here to testify.
And as a courtesy, I usually do let the witness, in case he wants to correct anything, have a chance to look at it, but I'm happy to read it in, if that's the local custom. What he said at his last, when he had his deposition taken, whatever you think is appropriate.
As long as you read it in, and then if he has a problem, then he could look at it. Okay?
No, the court's preference.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Buss. Would you like to keep your copy?
Yes, I'll keep it.
Now, Your Honor, what I'd like to do is actually start at page 72, line 20, and read through 74, line 4, if I may.
Yes.
Question. And when you said we pulled this together in 2014, meaning the revenue chart on 788. Now, Your Honor, 788 is the...
Right, I know. I understand.
Who is we? Answer. I had Drew Craig pull this together, and he was a young controls type person. And why did you ask him to pull it together? I just wanted to understand and try to project what we were looking at, what we would be looking at in 2014. Just trying to get a handle on, what we felt the recurring would be in the absence of the BP project. As it relates to get a handle on what would be occurring in 2014, why did you want to send this information to Mr. Nagy and Mr. Rockwell? Objection, I think it mischaracterizes his prior testimony. The witness, it was emailed, no doubt. This wasn't something that I intended to send to them. It was just an old chart in the middle of the year, and I didn't need to send a chart to know what the yearly recovering revenue is. I didn't need to send that. Did you discuss with MJ at any time what you anticipated your handle was on what was going to be occurring in 2014? So that's always a projection. And I discussed what I thought we could capture. Yes, I did. And did you discuss with Mr. Rockwell and Mr. Nagy revenue numbers of the sort that we're looking at in your either Sargent Electric year-end billings or in your business plan? We didn't discuss the actuals per se. What we discussed was what portion, what part we could capture.
Your Honor, I thought he was going to read to page 74 through line 22.
Right.
At least that was the promise So it puts it in the proper context.
So, you want to keep reading it?
Well, I mean,
I think that makes the point I wanted to make, that there was this conversation about what they could capture.
and he said there was no conversation, is that what
Right.
you're, okay.
I didn't say there was no conversation. I'd like to get that right back. You asked me if I told Tony what I could capture from Sargent. And nowhere in what you read back to me does it say I was going to capture Sargents. That's not what you asked me. I never told
The record will speak for itself. I'm not going to
Okay.
argue with this witness.
All right,
Can Mr. Ross finish his statement though?
sure, finish. I mean, answer, go.
This was never what we're going to take from Sargent. This was that we thought we could capture the market share. These were the numbers that I had available. This is what I was looking at in the analysis. We absolutely discussed what I thought we could capture, but it wasn't what we could take from Sargent. That was never discussed.
Your Honor, and Mr. Voss, Mr. Voss, when you joined Sargent, Sargent was already a major player in the Northwest Indiana market, right?
Yes, they were.
And that industrial sector includes steel and petrochemical companies, correct?
That is correct.
And among the companies operating within that market were Sargent, right?
Yes, Sargent was definitely a player.
Meade,
Yes.
Higher MCOR,
And Core Hire was also a player, yes.
and Continental.
Continental as well.
And you'd agree with me, right, that the two most significant players in that market, though, were Meade and Sargent, right?
The most significant players at BP were Meade and Sargent.
At BP.
At BP.
And when you arrived, Sargent had roughly a 55-year history in this marketplace, right?
Yes.
And Sargent had major customers in place when you arrived, right?
That is true.
That included BP, right?
Yes.
And ArcelorMittal, right? And USS, right?
Yes, that's
And
correct.
NIPSCO, right?
That's correct.
And you didn't have to go out and find those companies. They were already customers, right?
I did not have to go out and find those companies, no.
And Sargent had in place a staff you inherited that had confidential, historical, financial data and historical memory related to the various work they had done for all these customers, correct?
Yes.
And you inherited from Sargent long-term employees such as Mr. Frank
That's true.
and Mark Alberson, right?
Yes.
And Paul Schumann
Yes.
and Jeff Schumann
Correct.
and Kit Cabell
Yes.
and Jim Mattis
Yes.
and Jim Simmons.
Yes.
And these people were project managers and estimators, correct?
Yes, I think that's fair.
And in working together with these various customers, you all worked together as employees at Sargent, right?
We did.
And Sargent was paying your salaries, right?
Yes, they did.
And Sargent was paying for all the marketing that went into building those customer relationships, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And Sargent paid for all the business development costs that went into building those relationships, right?
Yes,
And you were never denied any funds for business development purposes, were you?
I was not.
And the historical information you had related to such things as estimating processes, customer contacts, proposals, and historic performance on jobs, right?
Yes.
And in fact, the information that Mr. Borders gave you that you used to start preparing your business analysis is Sargent information, right?
Yes, it is.
And it's not MJ's, right?
It is not.
And Mr. Voss, let me focus your attention for a second on this time around your time of departure. You told me, correct, that you wanted to leave Sargent on your own terms, right?
I did say that.
And one of the reasons that you wanted to leave Sargent on your own terms was because you thought you'd earned that, right?
I do think I earned that.
And you earned that because of the results that have been delivered to Sargent, right?
I do feel that way, yes.
As we've discussed, you've been working on your business analysis and meeting with MJ while you were still at Sargent, correct?
I did pursue other opportunities while I was still engaged in Sargent, yes.
And with respect to that business plan, we discussed the numbers a bit, but your business plan also shows that you had in mind other people who you wanted to bring with you, correct?
That is true.
And if you look for a second with me at Exhibit 2, Mr. Voss, you there?
Yes, I am.
And I think with base stamps, if we look for a second at MJ 784,
Okay.
and there we have a page at the top left-hand corner says Business Analysis NWI Electrical Construction Team. See that?
I do.
And then it says Capital Investment Summary, correct?
Yes.
And then it says Management Personnel. You see that?
I do.
And then it uses the word enticement, right?
Yes.
And there we have the number $97,500, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And then, if you turn to the next page of this exhibit, so we're still on Exhibit 2, and it's MJ 785. There we have a page that says Business Analysis Northwest Indiana Electrical Construction Team Personnel.
Yes, I do.
And here there is listed 2 managers and 5 estimator PMs, right?
Yes.
And your business analysis was looking to provide enticements of $7,500 a piece for estimator PMs, right?
That is correct.
And Mr. Frank, it was your view, correct, that you needed a core group of people to make this startup business profitable, correct?
Yes, this was a group of people that I built into this model, yes.
And you needed, wanted 5 project manager estimators as a core group to make this a profitable enterprise, right?
Yes.
Now, and at the time you were doing your business plan, you know or knew that you had no intentions of relocating, right?
I was I was exploring whether it would be feasible to pull together our business in this area, yes.
And you told Mr. Brockwell this was not a reload, meaning a relocation.
When I spoke with MJ, I did tell him that, yes.
So whoever you were bringing and whatever startup you were going to have here, you were going to have it in Northwest Indiana, correct?
Yes.
Now, and I think that you had also told me that as you contemplated your business analysis, that you were thinking about you having your own business in Northwest Indiana, right?
So that was the initial thought when I pulled this together, to see if I can make numbers work. That is true.
And to do that, you would have needed investors, right?
That is correct.
And instead, what's happened is that you've ultimately decided to work with MJ, which is funding these operations, correct?
I accepted the position with MJ.
Which is providing the funding base for this operation, correct?
Yes, they are.
And this operation right now in Northwest Indiana includes 13 employees?
I don't have the exact count of employees.
We took your deposition in May, right?
Yes, we did.
And in May, you recall saying you thought there were 13 employees at MJ Electric at that point?
I'm sorry, I don't recall that, but I don't recall that. I don't know how many employees we have right now.
And of the first 13 employees, were 12 out of the 13 taken from the ranks of Sargent Electric?
Yes, most of the people we hired are from Sargent, yes.
And out of that first 13, you recall 12 out of 13 were Sargent employees?
Yes, that may be correct.
Now, if we go back for a second to a chronology of events, which I think would be helpful here. We've taken a look and we've arrived at January 14th of 2014, right?
Yes.
And that's the date that's on this business analysis, right?
Yes.
And that's the first day that you recall calling Mr. Frame into your office to discuss reviewing your business analysis and what you should do next.
I did call Tom to review this analysis, yes.
And it's also true that on that day you wanted to prepare Tom for a meeting that was going to occur that night, right?
It's true.
And you were looking at your business analysis and preparing Tom for a meeting that was going to occur the night of January 14th with the MJ Electric representatives, correct?
That is correct.
And you were going to meet at a restaurant called Mangione's in Oak Brook, right?
Yes, that sounds correct.
And you and Tom did go to that meeting, right?
Yes.
And you met with Mr. Brockwell, who was the Executive Vice President, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And Marty Sutton, who's the Vice President of MJ, right?
That's right.
And you met with Bill Navy, who's Vice President of MJ, right?
Yes.
And as of January 14th, MJ had no business in Northwest Indiana, correct?
That's correct.
And at that meeting, you talked about your experience at Sargent and about the BP project, right?
Yeah, we discussed in general terms those things, yes.
And MJ at that meeting had no business plan, right?
MJ did not have a business plan.
That MJ provided you with no pro formas at that meeting.
That is true.
Or any current analysis for how it would come into this marketplace as it started, right?
That is true.
And after that meeting, or shortly after that meeting, MJ contacted you or Mr. Frank and said they wanted to continue talks with you, right?
Yes, it was a follow-up.
And you heard that by no later than January 16th, correct?
So I'm not clear on the dates, but there definitely was a follow-up after the meeting, yes.
So within a couple of days.
I don't recall the time frame. it makes sense.
So 2 or 3 days makes sense.
It does.
And then, within 2 or 3 days, you find out from MJ Electric that they want to continue talks with you, and by January 23rd, you meet with the president of MJ Electric, correct?
That is true.
And that's Steve Wright, right?
Yes, that's correct.
In your meeting at noontime on...
And, yes, that's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I'll watch it.
It's a common, what's the right word? Well, we're complicit, I guess, so I'll do my best too. Mr. Ross, it's correct that you had a meeting with MJ Electric executives at the Four Seasons Hotel in Chicago on January 23rd, correct?
Correct.
And that was a lunch meeting?
Yes, it was.
And you and Mr. Crane were still still Sargent employees?
Yes, we were.
And left work, that was a Thursday, right?
I'm sorry, I don't know what day it was.
Whatever day it was, you left work and went to...
I did do that, yes.
Right. And I think we were talking about the participants then before we started going back and forth maybe too quickly. Steve Whiteman was the president, right?
That is correct.
Of MJ, and he was at that meeting, right?
Yes, he was.
So was Mr. Rockwell, right?
Yes,
Also Mr. Sutton and Navy, right?
that is correct.
There was continuation of discussion about you and Mr. Frame opening an office for MJ in Northwest Indiana, correct?
Well, the discussion was coming forward, but we weren't clear where I was going to be in office. There was some discussion about us maybe driving up to their place up north, and the office location really wasn't discussed or knitted down at that point. What we were talking about was the two of us coming aboard.
And by the next day, on January 24th, you actually received a telephone call, right, from MJ saying that MJ was interested in making an offer to you and Mr. Frame, right?
Yes.
So I'm right that the time from meeting on January 14th, learning from MJ that they had oral offers they wanted to make to you took 10 days, right? January 14th to January 24th is 10 days, right?
It was very quickly, yes.
And thereafter, in just 3 days, on January 27th, you received a draft offer letter from MJ, right?
That's correct.
Your Honor, here's the first time that I'm going to head to some exhibits, and I'm hoping I marked this on my outline, but if I didn't,
Sure.
Your Honor, as a courtesy to all here, including you, while I'm making sure I got my next sequence of documents together, can we take 5 minutes for a restroom break?
Well, it's almost noon. Okay, let's take a break and see where we're going, and we might, I don't know, do we want to break for lunch now and continue? I mean, what is it, 22?
Well, you want to, it's obviously, we appreciate paying such close attention to us. Whatever's best for you is what's best for us. But if I could float a suggestion, I was thinking about a short break now, maybe come back and try to get another half hour, or take a break at 12:30. Is that too long, too late?
Staff is, it's not so much myself, the court reporter.
Do you have a preference? If whatever's best for you, Your Honor.
What's that?
My co-counsel here, Mr. Saldinger, said, I want to get a couple of documents organized, and we take a short break now and go till 12:15, maybe take another half hour.
Okay.
To make another sequence.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.